Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to the SIG CLI. My name is Maciej, and I'll be your host today. So we have quite a lot of topics already on the agenda. Let's start quickly with the announcements. 1.14 enhancements freeze starts on January 29th, and the code freeze will be on March 7th. We have Clarence on the call. She will be talking a little bit more about the 1.14 release. Other interesting stuff is there is a new work group being formed that will affect SIG CLI, which is designed to discuss the topic of supporting LTS, which will be a very important topic, especially when we will extract kubectl to its own repository. This will affect us significantly, so we need to carefully look at the outcomes of that working group. Finally, there was a blog post about kubectl diff on Kubernetes.io, so definitely check this one out. On to the next topic, which is the test grid. I had the pleasure to hold the role of the on-call for the past 4 weeks, actually, because we skipped the meeting on January 2nd. Thankfully, during the Christmas break, as well as through the initial weeks of 2019, both the test grid and queue was very stable. I didn't have to intervene a lot in the case. I've also updated the test coverage document that you can check out on your own. And with that, I'm gonna announce that if you are interested in joining the test on call role for the upcoming weeks, feel free to sign up in the document that's linked under the test grid. And if I remember correctly, Menchie is taking the role starting this week. I think that closes the parts of the announcement and the test grid, so we can move on to the main topics. And Clarence will start with updates on the 1.14 release.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Claire, and I wanted to join your SIG today to introduce myself. I'm the lead for our 1.14 release cycle for enhancements, and I wanted to check in with SIG CLI to see if there are any enhancements that y'all are hoping to get into the 1.14 release. So far, on our tracked list, we have issue 579, which is the updated plugin mechanism for kubectl, and issue 633, which is integrate customize into kubectl, but wanted to make sure that there weren't any others that we aren't currently tracking in our sheet.
So both are fine. I just left you a comment earlier today with regards to the plugin mechanism, and customize is being currently actively worked on as well. So yes, both of them are actively worked on and will land in 1.14.
Awesome. And then also, I think both have KEPs, which is great, but if there are any new issues that folks want to get into the 1.14 release, they must have a KEP associated with them.
The KEP for customize is being currently updated. So we'll be actually discussing this topic right after you. And the plugin mechanism does not need any updates. It will just, the mechanism itself will be promoted to GA per the description from that enhancement issue.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. That's all I had to share. If there are any questions for me, please feel free to ask them here, or you can reach me in Slack.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot. Okay, so Customize was being called out, so I'm gonna pass the mic over to Phil and Jeff, and they will get us through what's the current state of Customize and all. Phil, you want to share your screen?
Yep, sorry, I was having some trouble getting Zoom to work.
No worries, no worries. Let me stop my share. Now you should be able to share the screen.
All right, so yeah, we're going to give an update on Customize. So the current state of Customize is that we merged a PR, I think 2 weeks ago. No, it was more than that. Right after KubeCon, which had Customize integration into the resource builder. And that discussion happened on the PR. The CAP actually had it as a subcommand. And so we realized that not everyone got to participate in that discussion about what the precise UX looked like because it happened on the PR and not the CAP. And so another thing we realized was that some of the customized functionality for, particularly for generating secrets, actually would be a surprise to users and potentially a security issue because users might not realize what they're running. So for those reasons, we decided to roll back the PR and do a security review where we just make sure that all the features we're really certain are secure, as well as revisit the UX. And so the current state is we're updating the CAP. The likely proposal in the CAP will be that we first introduce Customize as a subcommand. And we want to do that. We think we want that regardless, because Customize processes files, folks are going to want to debug and experiment, and we want to be able to teach users about how this stuff's working, and having a command that just takes in the customization file and then does the customizations on top of it and shows this to the user makes a lot of sense to have in there. But we also believe that we can get a much better experience from having deeper integrations. The intention is to have this as part of the CLI runtime. Sorry, reading question. New to. I'll look at the question in a sec. But that is the goal. That is the UX we want. It provides the ability to do more interesting things like tie back maybe errors in the stuff that is generated from Customize to the actual files and file numbers where that error came from and these sorts of things. So that is where we want to get. We will do that as a separate CAP. The reason is there's UX we want to discuss there and just a lot of more discussion around how that integration is going to work. The introducing a subcommand is pretty straightforward since Customize is written in Cobra as a command already, whereas the resource builder code is something we want to make sure we keep really clean. And the CL runtime is code we want to make sure we want to keep really clean. And so how do we actually bring these two libraries together is something we need to figure out. Cool. Let's do questions and then let's do introductions because I think we might have skipped that.
I just had one question. I saw the discussion in the mailing list about some of the concerns around Customize, and it looked like they were going to be followed up across multiple SIGs, so SIG CLI, SIG architecture, and then during the committee, possibly even a third SIG, right? I'm wondering, is this the primary place where these discussions will occur, or is there a different SIG if I'm interested in this topic?
If you're talking about Customize, this is the right spot. If you're talking about scope of the project, which is kind of a cross-cutting thing, and scope impacts every single SIG, then steering committee is the, or not, sorry, not steering committee. SIG architecture is the right location. Steering committee is not the right location for either one of those things.
So this is Matt Freeney. Just to jump in real quick, just to add to what David asked for, I think I didn't add them to the agenda. I'm sorry, I didn't. The points were actually around documentation and material for people who are going to go, because if I understand, the customized functionality and customization YAML was baked into the CLI runtime package. And so there's lots of projects, not just kube control, that consume that. And so one of the things that would be the ask is about documentation and material for consumers of that, so they know how to leverage it or not, depending on what they want to do. What's that experience was one of the asks in those conversations, just to kind of fill out the well-rounded thing of, I'm a consumer of a package that Kubernetes uses. How do I go about consuming that and working with it?
Yeah, hey, Mache and Juan, do you know where we're at with CLI runtime? Because the way I remembered it is that we are publishing, we have an intention, right, to get the kube control libraries out, and we're kind of in the middle of moving kube control out. But until kube control has actually been moved out of Kubernetes, all of the repos and stuff we're creating are not, like, they're not things, while they are available publicly, much like the code inside Kubernetes is available publicly, we're not saying, hey, like, these things are definitely, like, settled or well documented. That's not
or supportable. Yeah, that is correct. We extracted those as part of the overall kubectl extraction out of the main repo. We do publish them. We are the initial consumers within kubectl itself, but we're more towards alpha state rather than beta or GA, for God forbid, because we are not 100% sure whether the current contents is the full functionality that we want to allow people to use. That hasn't been fully fleshed out, and until that happens, we will be publishing it, we will be consuming it, but we are working on the docs in the meantime, as well as on the actual functionality of that library. That's the current state of the CLI runtime itself.
So just to add on top of that, I learned on the list anyway that there's 2 projects I wasn't aware of are actually consuming this already for their own purposes. Is it documented anywhere that there's a lot of undocumented things? This is alpha quality. Is that actually documented for them as consumers of it? I was surprised. There were projects I didn't even realize. People are already consuming this and using this in their own ecosystem projects.
No, that's fine that they're consuming it. It's just we're not saying clearly that this is a supported feature. We will try hard not to break it in a way that it won't be backwards compatible, because we are the first consumers of it, so we will make hard use of it. But we are not giving this as a hard guarantees.
I think, Matt, your point is that looking at the page, I see that. Sorry, I know. Looking at the page, like, it's not. One could come to this page and be like, "Oh, awesome! A library exists for me to use," right? And not realize that, like, that there's no support for this thing, and we're not ready for other people to use it unless they're just like, ripping all the safety guards off, right?
Yeah, and like, if I go look at the releases, I see a 1.13.2 release, and so if I don't know the context of this, I may not realize that, oh, this package is really not, and ecosystem consumers are not necessarily on the inside knowing what we know. They may just say, look at this thing, it's version 1.13.2, that's stable, that's great. And because it's version with, it looks like Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And so this doesn't exactly help that consumer to navigate the quality and stability of this code, or to actually say, this is alpha quality, or there's lots of things that aren't documented.
Right, but if you go to the README of the package, one of the first things at the compatibility is we are clearly saying there are no compatibility guarantees for this repository. it is direct support of Kubernetes, so branches will track Kubernetes and be compatible with that repo. As we more cleanly separate the layers, we will review the compatibility guarantees.
So I guess something that could be worth doing, could be to maybe have more official documentation that tracks the current availability or release of the CLI runtime. Something users can go to maybe on the Kube site and see what the current stage is, maybe alpha, and then see that, for example, the only guarantee we currently make is that we dogfood it ourselves in kubectl.
I don't even think it's alpha. I think it's EAP.
Yeah.
But we can throw something on there just saying like this is EAP. Don't expect anything from it. The release things mean nothing. Use this at your own risk until it's been released as at least alpha or beta.
Yeah, and eventually I would love to see documentation that tells folks how to do it. I understand, given the number of people on it, that's a tall order. And if you say, this is not released, people don't necessarily have that kind of expectation. But I'm just thinking of the concerns of that ecosystem consumer consuming a library, and that's how they're going to see it. And as long as we're clear with that, that would really help people, I think. And I was surprised. There are people using this in their production applications.
How can we maybe get help from the people who want to use this? I think maybe that's like a great place to contribute is documentation, because it's kind of a low bar, and we'd love to take, I bet one of us could even spend half an hour walking someone through the thing if they're then willing to document that.
I'm pretty sure if they're already consuming it, they might know it even better than we are. So any efforts on improving the documentation on these bits would be highly appreciated. So if you, Matt, know folks that are actually using this, consuming it, that most importantly have some feedback with regards to the functionality, please let them know that we are very interested in their feedback, because that was one of the reasons why we published the CLI runtime, to actually gather some initial feedback about the current functionality, what people think, what people don't like about it. It was also to support the plugin authors writing kubectl plugins to provide them with some basic building blocks for writing kubectl-like commands.
To Matt's point, if we're publishing it for plugin authors, we should be clear to the plugin authors that hey, this is way better than nothing. Nothing is a bad spot to be in. This is way better than vendoring Kubernetes. That's the worst spot to be in.
Yes.
But this is not. We're not hey, we have a plugin SDK. Expect
no.
a great experience.
Yeah, that's the reason that we didn't call it plugin SDK. That's the reason that we went with CLI runtime, because it is a building block. It's not an SDK, and it will never be one.
That being said, I would probably see the future of this going towards someone building on top of it to provide an SDK. So an abstraction on top of this is something I could see in the future that we can market, or someone else can market as an SDK.
Okay, Aaron had some question. Not sure if that's with regards to CLI runtime or customize itself, but I promised him a voice. So
thank you. It's just a real quick question, and I apologize if you addressed this earlier when talking about customize, but I think that some of the discussion around this was presumed that kubectl or kubectl, or however you pronounce it, is taking the direction that everything is going to turn into a plugin one day. We've got this plugin mechanism, it's great, it's awesome, we'll just use that for everything. And I feel like there are probably some technical reasons that Kustomize was not implemented as a plugin, and I would just kind of be curious about the state of plugins today. If they really are this super solid thing that we can lean on, or if we still have some progress that needs to be made that the community could help with.
So, I can speak on a couple of things, but Maciej, go ahead.
Actually, we, as of today, we are very happy with the current state of the plugin mechanism, and that's what I'm going to focus, and I'm going to pass over to Phil so that he can expand on the customized plugin part. So the plugin mechanism by itself was proven to be working just fine, both from the discussion that I had in during KubeCon past month, and overall from the feedback that we gathered. So, and we actually are moving the plugin mechanism to GA because it was beta in 1.13, and we will be GAing that in 1.14 unless I'm going to hear some major objections that I have not so far. So the plugin mechanism is stable, and it is, I wouldn't call it rock solid, but we're very happy with the outcome of the plugin mechanism itself. So I hope that answered part of your question. I'm going to pass over to Phil.
It did. Before Phil continues, and you probably already hit this, I apologize because I'm time constrained. Like, if you are planning on taking the plugin mechanism to GA, I hope that there is an enhancement tracking issue for it that Claire can track for us.
Yeah.
And there's
I believe
all that good stuff.
I believe Matcha linked to the tracking issue in the agenda. I'll post it in the chat.
Sweet, awesome.
That's
okay.
579.
Okay, thank you.
Just looking at the agenda. Yeah, and Claire was asking about that one at the beginning of the meeting. You might not have been here.
Yep.
When she was talking about it. No worries. So you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. I'll just say that when we talk about building kube control itself as plugins, that can mean a lot of different things. And there's like aspirational visions, right? Where you have like all of kube control is actually just plugins, and we have this great distribution mechanism, and we can update different subcommands at different release velocities and patch them independently and like do all this stuff. And like, I think that's a cool vision to think of. There's also like the practical matter of like, what benefit do we or anyone else get from making a specific command a plugin, right? And practically right now, that means we don't get any benefit, but it's much harder for us to distribute, and it's a larger binary for people to download. I had this conversation, but I was actually all in on the like all plugins vision a year ago. I talked with Clayton at KubeCon Austin, and he's like, so how big is kube control? 50 megabytes. Okay, how many commands do you have? About 40. Okay, so you distribute, and they're all about the same size, right? Because most of the code size is vendored or like static, right? So each one ends up being about 50 megabytes. So now when someone wants to download kube control, it's a 2 gigabyte file instead of a 20 or 50 megabyte file, right? And so it's like, so then that led to, well, Git does this actually with symlinks. Okay, so now we compile everything into the same binary. It's just symlinks into the same binary, right? At which point you get to, what are we really doing for ourselves, right? We're creating a bunch of symlinks to exercise the plugin mechanism. And so the vision doesn't make much sense unless we're getting like concrete value out of it. And so I don't think we're going to build anything as plugins until we have like an actual benefit we get from building that thing as a plugin, because there are some real downsides to it.
So can I ask something on plugins to kind of just, if you don't mind me jumping in on the philosophy of plugins?
Yeah.
Because there's the whole idea of having plugins that kind of alter behavior of something. Maybe they, we've talked about receiving an event, and a plugin can then act on that event and alter data inside, things like that like extend functionality. Then there may be plugins, something like Git, where it's really just another thing that's called, but it's in the chain of things you call, right? And then there are things like the Unix style, where you pipe lots of things together, and they have things like a common interface. And for some tools, that has actually been Kubernetes API structure. So one tool can export the YAML and proper formatting. Another tool can import it, transform it, export it again. Another tool can do the same. There's things like that, or act on it. Have you thought much about the philosophy around how you do extensibility? Because that's kind of three different things there.
Yes, we have. And do you mind if I cut this, since we're about 30 minutes in the meeting and there's a couple items on the agenda and we haven't actually done intros? I want to make sure people who came here like with something on the agenda actually get to talk to it. So maybe we'll wrap this up. Yes, we have, Matt. The extensibility we've been thinking about more is like, we're starting with data-driven commands. I think that's like actually something we understand pretty well. It's pretty flexible. And so the idea is instead of like trying to reach deep into the kube control functionality, like providing ways, like looking at more like how do web browsers allow websites to, you know, provide arbitrary applications without having to download that stuff, right? Is that you establish, you know, a format for publishing the functionality, and then the browser interprets it, and looking at kube control more like that. Other plugin, you know, I think we'd be open to more and more conversations about this, but we do want to like, we are focusing on like what are the simplest, biggest hit ways we can provide users the ability to do what they want specifically.
Okay, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Aaron.
So I have to bounce for another meeting, but I'll just tag on. The other example I see within the Kubernetes community, if we talk about trying to extract functionality out of a commonplace is such that there's like a level playing field and everybody sort of operates the same core versus ecosystem versus non-core. The effort to do this for cloud providers is the other model that comes to mind pretty quickly. And I feel like the reason that that's progressing is because the people who have skin in the game are actively participating in, you know, what the best way to provide that extensibility is. I have concerns that I hear a dialogue of we and have you considered, and I would love for there to be a more continual discussion between the people who had such strong opinions on Kustomize, because I think this is a great forum for, you know, finding the right boundaries, finding the right places for extensibility, so on.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Aaron. Like, it would be a huge difference if the folks that really want, like, we have like a lot of people building APIs and like, hey, I want to be able to do kube control, create, or whatever. But you know, without those people actually showing up or willing to contribute, it's going to be slow and maybe not necessarily as good of an outcome as it could be otherwise.
So I also have to leave, but I want to also echo Aaron's point. I think it's a good one. I've looked back at at multiple projects Slack list, and there is almost no discussion about the other projects. Like if you look at the Kustomize channel, there's like a half dozen questions about Helm, and they basically say, well, we don't really know about Helm. And then you go to the Helm channel and you search for Kustomize, it doesn't come up. And I've talked to people in the Helm community about Kustomize, and again, there just does not seem to be a lot of dialogue. And it's not just Helm and Kustomize, it's all of these projects. So I think more dialogue would definitely help.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with this. So there's a lot of projects doing a lot of different things as soon as you step outside of the Kubernetes API. And they're doing things in different ways. They've got shared code libraries. Sometimes they have entirely different processes. Sometimes they're just crazy bespoke processes. Sometimes there's commonalities to them. There's a lot going on in the ecosystem here. And we've had a bit of that over in SIG apps, although we haven't had as much lately. But now, you know, I don't know that those conversations have come over to SIG CLI because it's never been really a place concentrating on app workflows and those engagements and how people manage those things. And so that may be a reason, but it's probably worth saying, how do we have better engagement with the ecosystem and tying these things together and understanding the space, and how these things can build and work together, or sometimes don't, and that's okay, just as a general.
Yeah, and if maybe we could have like PMs or this sort of stuff, like we're short-staffed in terms of execution as it is, right? And if we were to say pull off half the team from getting kube control out of Kubernetes to just like focus on engagements, like I think that would not necessarily get us where we need to be. So maybe there's an opportunity for folks who excel in other roles to come help and facilitate that dialogue.
So here's what I'm going to ask, because we've used up a bunch of time and you've got other agenda items. Let's give the other people time to talk and then circle back to figuring out how this moves forward.
Yeah, and we can do this follow-up. This doesn't have to be solved today, right? We have other things.
Yeah, but
I was about to propose that if you want to open the discussion about this topic particularly, maybe start a mailing thread to the SIG CLI, maybe loop in SIG architecture, and we can continue the discussion over there, and so that we can focus on the other topics that we have in the agenda, especially that I know there's one person new that wanted to discuss an issue that he wants to work on. So I'm going to break it here.
Well, SIG apps too, because all of this ecosystem conversation around tooling there has primarily been happening there. And so to look that in as well.
Yeah,
I have something on the schedule to go meet up at SIG apps.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, next on the agenda, Phil, you have Helm templates as a customization. Young base.
Sorry, can we do intros first? Actually, I just want to make sure everyone who's like new and wants to meet gets a chance to.
I was hoping that we were gonna do intros as part of the stand-ups that we do towards the end of the meeting, like we usually do.
Oh, okay.
Maybe we should rethink the stand-ups as one of the initial steps and not towards the end. But honestly, both ways work fine for me.
Okay.
But since today it wasn't done at the beginning, so let's move it over towards the end of the as usually.
Sounds great. George, are you here? George SVQ. This was from Twitter, actually. Someone on Twitter, wanted to talk about the different formats and how do we make sure that like kube control is able to consume like Helm templates or other formats, KSONet, or whatever it is. How do we make sure that there's good interoperability here? And so I added it to the agenda based on that. If no one here is going to speak to this topic, I suggest we just delete it and move on.
Okay. Yeah, that's.
The one thing I will say is we've actually discussed this a fair amount over in SIG apps. And so if that person wants to come ask over there, we've got opinions on it and we've talked about it a fair amount over the years.
Can we just like actually leave it on the agenda and strike it out? That way we know that it was there to be talked about in case the person is like, did you talk about this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, we can move to Matt. Matt has an idea on one of the issues, which is adding custom columns. You ready to get us through?
So I'll just kind of introduce myself. I'm Matt. I work at Beatport. We're kind of a music streaming service for DJs. But I think I'll get into that when we talk in the stand-ups. Just to kind of address the issue that I'm hoping to kind of make my first contribution. This issue is addressing kind of limitations with custom columns in the get subcommand. So with custom columns currently, when you provide custom columns to that flag, you'll end up with the set of columns that you provide, but only those columns, and you won't be able to see any of the default columns. And so some of the suggestions on that issue were that we could add another flag to basically force the default columns to be printed, as well as some custom columns. So similar to the capital L flag, we could add a capital C flag that would add custom columns to the default columns. And then some other suggestions were provided there. I provided one that said we could modify custom columns to just provide a keyword such as default, so that when we provide that keyword in addition to custom columns, that would also print the defaults. I think we're leaning more towards a new flag rather than tacking on this functionality to custom columns, but I'm open to suggestions. So just kind of wanted to get a consensus on what everybody thinks and hopefully make this my first issue.
Sean had a question about additional printer columns, and Juan might know something about that. Does that ring any bells?
Yeah, I guess to give some background, this was something that was also brought up by Clayton with regards to enhancing the user experience. And I am in full support, I would say, in terms of this being something that improves user experience. And as to how it can be addressed, I believe right now custom columns live in CLI runtime, although correct me if I'm wrong, Maciej. Which means that any improvements here would propagate to any consumers of CLI runtime as well. I don't foresee any difficulties or issues. I would say there might be hesitation on maybe some people's part because we'd be introducing a new like short flag, and I know those have been in the past to introduce. But if we can get past perhaps a short flag, I would say that would be the correct way, in my opinion, to move forward with this.
We might be, since this is specifically towards get command, it might be narrowed so that it only affects the get command. I'm not 100% sure about the custom columns. I think they are somewhere close to get go command itself.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that makes sense.
So aside only from the what should be the right flag name, I think the functionality is just go implement it and ping us. Sorry. And then we can always figure out what will be the proper name for the flag.
There's already an additional printer columns functionality, I think, that is geared towards CRDs. I wonder, that sounds, maybe that doesn't, I'm not all that familiar with it, but maybe that sounds exactly like what he's asking for is I'll look that up myself in the code base and see how that fits in. But there's something already in the code base for that, additional printer columns anyway.
So I think
CRDs is working differently. CRDs have an additional printer columns which are defined at the CRD level, which basically means when we are server-side printing an object, we are looking at the CRD definition. We are taking the default columns and eventually appending some additional ones as defined in the CRD.
Yeah, I mean, so that works only for CRDs, but it sounds like it's exactly what he's asking for.
This is slightly different because that is specifically for
sorry, it doesn't work for the
get itself command.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in, that this concept already exists for CRDs.
Are there any other questions to Matt?
No, I think that sounds good to me. So I guess the consensus then is that we would like to go with a new flag. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
Yes, that is correct.
And we're not sure on the name of it yet, but the functionality is.
Yeah, I think picking the name is a matter of getting some overall agreement on what should be the name. But I think the most of the work actually is behind implementing the functionality. And once that is done, we can figure out the name convention for the new flag.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Okay. Final topic is from Sean.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring up, we've already, this exact same link was put in the December 19th meeting, and it's a link to some of the notes from an impromptu meeting we had at KubeCon, where we catalyzed or started the concept of looking at how to plan long-term. And we've initially come up with about 5 high-level areas. And so I'm hoping that my ask is for all the participants to have a look at this document and look at these 5 high-level long-term focus areas and give us feedback on, which focus areas, basically on what we think on this, so that we can eventually come to some consensus on what those long-term focus areas are, so that we can begin the concrete long-term planning process. And just to circle back, what we're hoping to do is get consensus on what are the high-level areas that we want to work on, and then start digging into each one of these individually to figure out how we would address them. And so, for instance, one of them is extensibility. And we already have some very good ideas on extensibility with the plugins and data-driven commands. Please have a look at these 5 high-level long-term focus areas so that we can move forward on our long-term planning. And I'll just give a quick overview of the 5 areas that we've started with. Is extensibility, version skew supportability. We'd like to address this version skew problem. Testing as the 3rd, independent releases as the 4th, and observability, being able to get concrete metrics on usage. So please give us your feedback on what you think about those as focus areas for our long-term planning. Thanks.
Okay. On to the final item, which is stand-ups. Now is your time to introduce yourself, or say what you will be working on, or you were working in the past couple of weeks.
I guess if no one else is going first, I'll go ahead and go first. So I just wanted to highlight some stuff that we need to address with regards to splitting kubectl out of the main repo. Basically, as part of one of the commands, auth reconcile, we have to focus on how to best split our dependence on RBAC API helpers, RBAC storage helpers, and anything that goes along with that. And so I've put together a prototype, and here I'll link it now, but I need to probably title that. Essentially, my hope is to gather visibility for this such that we can all come together as a SIG and decide, if this could be improved upon, how much we're willing to sort of copy over in terms of, achieving an independent auth reconcile command without bringing in the rest of the repo. And essentially, whether or not it's worth to explore this maybe as a plugin or to keep pushing ahead with what's there. As it stands right now, we're also copying generated code. And so I think that's probably the thing that I believe should be fully discussed so that everyone's fully aware of that. To anyone that probably missed any context around this, and this is completely new to them, to give some quick background, we have a goal in mind to split kubectl out of the main Kubernetes repo. And as part of that goal, we have to be able to snip any dependencies that kubectl has on the rest of the repo. This aims to address one of those dependencies that need to be snipped. And if there's any questions, concerns, or if you'd rather take this discussion to the mailing list or perhaps even a Slack thread, then I would be completely fine with that.
Suvro is raising his hand. Go ahead.
Oh, I raised my hand for stand-ups. Is it
Go
now
ahead.
the time?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hey, hi. Sorry, I don't have a camera right now, so I couldn't show you guys my beautiful face. But sorry about that. So I have been working with the Kubernetes for some time. like 3 months or so. I work in a company called Ribbon Communications. I'm based out of Ottawa, Canada, and I did talk with Philip before in Slack, and I wanted to work on an issue, which is this one. I will I will push it in the chat box right now. This is an old issue. It was assigned to Shai Wang before, but it fell off over a period of time. It kind of interested me, and I was thinking of getting my hands dirty for my first issue. What do you guys think of? And also, I would, as Philip had asked me to ask in this meet, is to ask for a mentor if someone could mentor me for maybe for this issue or some other issue. Yeah, because I'm up for the working with the community. That's it.
Also, Clayton, I don't know if you saw that Clayton responded about like shell completion plugins and left a comment about that.
Sorry.
Sorry, I said, sorry, we lost sound here for a sec. Clayton, there's some comments on that about shell completion plugins. I don't know if you read those.
Clayton suggested that instead of adding or expanding functionality, we could work on improving the shell completion so that it solves the initial problems, so that you only type the initial couple of letters of a pod or any resource name, and the rest is auto-completed. It is a possible direction this issue can go into. And since this is an old issue and a lot of topics has been moving and has changed in the first place, it would be good if you could propose your solution during one of the next meetings, maybe. What would you like to do? How to solve the problems in that issue before actually implementing them? How would that sound?
Can I ask quickly, are you just like, did you just pick this issue because it looked like not that maybe a good starter issue and you wanted to get started, or is this like do you feel like, oh, this is something you actually want to solve? Because if you're just looking to get started, you know, it's possible that we might be able to give you something better than this one, given that you actually have to, it looks like the solution that we need to build isn't straightforward here. It's still under discussion.
Well, to be honest, I always wanted something like this. It kind of irritated me when I do kubectl get nginx and, for example, nginx and get pods nginx, and I couldn't find one because it got a random name. So I always wondered that if there was something, as the title says, if kubectl could do something more smart, and as soon as I press enter, it asks me, oh, did you mean this one? Then press 1. Or if you want to just delete, for example, kubectl, kubectl delete pods nginx, then -- all or something similar, it would delete all the pods with the name nginx prefixed or suffixed or something. Prefixed makes more sense. So that's how I started Googling, and when I landed up in this issue, and I thought, oh, this is something which I want, and it seems like someone was working over here. And I went through Shai Wang's code. I didn't know Go. I did do some basic Go, how it works, and for loops and this and that, just to understand everything here. So yes, it's not just because I want to work on an issue, it's also because I landed up on this issue because I was looking for something similar.
Okay, great. Then that's a good reason to take on this issue.
Okay, thank you. Anything?
So, Machi, I think we're saying the next steps are like create a cap or something that proposes how we're going to solve this in ways so the trade-offs that have been discussed.
Yeah, probably describing your proposed solution in that issue and show up on one of the next SIG CLI meetings and discuss it in depth. And if we can get an agreement on the direction, then you could proceed with the implementation. I want to ensure that the entire SIG is okay with the direction that you're taking this in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. One naive question, which is, what is this CAP thing which people what's the acronym for?
CAP stands for Kubernetes Enhancements Proposal, which is a
Okay.
document that lives in the enhancements repo under Kubernetes org. All the proposed changes to the Kubernetes are started as a document describing the proposed changes, and they are landing over there. Although in the majority of issues, CAPs are for major features. I'm not sure if yours is such one, but it would be good to start with a proposal fully described in the issue itself.
So
Yeah.
you mean you want me to like go through some existing caps over here in this link which Philip just posted, and just make something similar with my inputs in it and put it over there?
I think it's fine to do what Maciej said and describe it in the issue.
In that issue 17144, describe in detail what you're proposing to do, how you're proposing to solve the issue that was described in the initial description, in the initial comment. You can link to some proof of concept PR that you might open in the meantime, and then during one of the next 6 CLI meetings, you can get a time slot where you can propose and discuss through your proposed solution, your proposed implementation, and then we can say whether we're okay with it or not, or suggest some modification or changes. That's why it would be very important to start with describing your approach before actually implementing it, because it will be easier for you to thought through the solution, and as well for us, it will be easier to figure out whether your proposed solution does make sense, or we would like to see this go in a different direction. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. Just wanted to clarify that when you say propose solutions, I mean, you mean examples that, okay, this is the problem and this is what I think it should do, and or you mean I should write the code and then I should.
I mean, I want to have a description how you're planning to solve the issue. You're saying this is you're stating the problem, you're stating the end result, and the most important part is how you want to get from A to B with as much details as possible, because we're all developers and we want to know whether your proposed solution fits into the overall kubectl design, or we would like to see it differently. And majority of the discussion should happen before you actually start implementing, because it will save you some time if your initial direction will be different than what we imagine as the overall goal from kubectl.
I got it. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome.
And just to add on to that, sorry, one quick thing everyone should know. Every single feature is supposed to be in a cap for 1.14 and going forward, tied to a release with an issue. So it doesn't have to be big. They can be tiny, but you need to have one. Okay,
makes sense. I missed that one, I guess.
Yeah, they're just SIG release is just trying to spread the word on that.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other stand-ups they want to bring up? Okay, hearing none. So before I'm going to close, I'm going to add one another heads up. I'm planning to do some major shifting inside of the package kubectl itself. I meant to do it before when we were closing 113, but I didn't manage because when I started pulling the triggers with it and cleaning the package kubectl directory, there were so many dependencies that I didn't want it to clean, that the PR grew from small cleaning to a major cleaning. I'll probably do that within the next couple of weeks, hoping that this will further clean the contents of the package kubectl. I want to get rid of the package kubectl describe version and describe structure and flatten those where possible, and generally get rid of a couple of utils that live in package kubectl root directory, and either split them into separate commands that are actually consuming them, or get rid of those. So just a heads up that there will be some major refactoring cleaning going on. Okay. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting for today and see you in 2 weeks. Thank you all. Bye.